We take on this role of hosting COP28 with humility, with a deep sense of responsibility, and a great sense of urgency.
Well, you may have missed it. Just this week, the road to the UN's climate change conference started in Berlin, with an event that's considered to be the unofficial kickoff to negotiations. And it's a significant year because for the first time, the world is evaluating how it's doing on the Paris Agreement. And spoiler alert, it's not good. This year's conference is being hosted by the United Arab Emirates, which is one of the world's largest oil-producing countries. And the man they chose to chair the conference is causing some people some concern. And ultimately, it could impact negotiations at this critical juncture in the fight against climate change.
Climate change campaigners have expressed outrage at the appointment of the head of one of the world's biggest oil companies as president of this year's UN Climate Summit in the United Arab Emirates.
Environmentalists are criticising a decision by the United Arab Emirates to name Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber as the president of this year's COP28 climate talks.
Sultan Al Jaber is CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, a firm that pumps some 4 million barrels of crude per day.
The man tapped to act as president of COP28, Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber. He's the UAE's climate envoy. He's the CEO of ADNOC, which is the country's state-owned oil company. And he's also the chair of Masdar, a government-owned renewable energy organization, which he founded.
Depending on which hat he wears or emphasizes, he could either play a very productive and impressive role, or what has a lot of NGOs and a lot of countries concerned is that he will be a representative for oil interests.
Al Jaber has said that fossil fuels have an important role to play in the fight against climate change.
And if we are to successfully transition to the energy system of tomorrow, we cannot simply unplug from the energy system of today.
And even though he's going to be chairing the UN's climate conference, he hasn't stepped down from his role as the head of a major oil company. And a lot of people are worried about that.
Allowing someone who also has interest in the success of a company based on the extraction of fossil fuels puts in tension these two objectives and leaves the public wondering which interests will he put forward. Those of climate conferences, which is to really tackle runaway climate change and limit warming to 1.5 degrees, or those of the company he also represents.
And this role as president of COP, it's a position that holds a lot of influence.
Each country generally comes into a COP with a set of goals for what they want to accomplish, and then they use their role as the president to bring different countries together and try to move the negotiations towards the outcomes that they want.
And to give you a sense of just how influential a president can be, we don't need to look that far. Just look back to last year, to Egypt's turn in the chair, when the final agreement left out strong language on phasing out fossil fuels.
The European Union supported the phase out of unabated fossil fuels. I think, were able to find other countries here that wanted to go forward with a fossil fuel phase out. Unfortunately, we weren't able to achieve that here, but we will keep going at it.
It was very clear from the start that Egypt did not want to see language about fossil fuel phase out in the text, in the decision of the COP. And so despite over 80 parties, including Canada, the United States, pushing for the inclusion of a phase out of unabated fossil fuels, we never saw that language in the text. And that's because the president in its role is the one who puts forward drafts.
So the president and the host country have a lot of power in setting the agenda. This year's conference is expected to address a few key things. Fossil fuels are likely to come up again, and climate activists and scientists say the urgency to phase them out is even greater.
We're already seeing momentum build on the phase out of, albeit unabated, fossil fuels. Recently, G7 environment and energy ministers agreed to, in their communique, this phase out. And so the question for Al Jaber is whether he'll want to allow and lead a powerful and honest conversation about the future of this sector.
If you are taking the warming that we have already experienced very seriously, and the damages that we are experiencing year after year, particularly in highly vulnerable countries, you don't say that we need to phase out fossil fuels over time. You start thinking about how do we phase them out very, very quickly.
So the question remains, what kind of COP presidency will we see from the United Arab Emirates and Sultan Al Jaber? Here's Al Jaber in his own words.
We know that fossil fuel will continue to play a role in the foreseeable future in helping meet global energy requirements. So our aim should be focused on ensuring that we phase out emissions from all sectors, whether it's oil and gas or high emitting industries, while in parallel, we should exert all effort and all investments in the renewable energy and clean technology space.
We'll have to wait and see.